Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that shines the light of biblical truth on vital issues from today's headlines that impact every American, Jew and Christian, people of faith and people of conscience. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore. If you missed the last episode of this podcast, you will find it and our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org. I also want to remind you to listen and share this and all of our previous podcasts with your family and friends so that they can become more informed about this and other related issues. Our goal at PJTN is to equip you to stand against the disinformation by taking back local control of your community and your children's and grandchildren's education. The first step to that process is education. We must become informed. Remember to visit our website daily to receive updates on all of PJTN's groundbreaking initiatives and programs, and sign up to receive PJTN's media and action alerts to share with family and friends. As a PJTN watchman, your action could mean all the difference in the success of our global mission to combat the enemy that is trying to rob our children of their future. So please, help me spread this vital information today. Now, having said that, we are commanded in the Bible to teach our children the Word of God, as stated in Joel chapter 1, verse 3. Quote, "Tell your children about it, let your children tell their children, and their children another generation." That's 3 generations of children who are to be taught about God's covenant with Israel and the exodus from Egypt. Unfortunately, we have failed miserably, and we are witnessing the evidence of that in our classrooms today. So what can we do to take back local control of our community? What are some actions that must be taken to reverse the course we are currently on? We are witnessing parents and citizens nationwide who are mobilizing against the propaganda and history revisionism being peddled to our children. And now we are even witnessing anti-Semitism and Holocaust revisionism in their curriculum. Organizations and institutions that were once considered respected and trusted have bought into the anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian narrative and can no longer be trusted. More and more teaching organizations like the NEA, as well as teachers' unions, have bought into this propaganda and are actively pushing this effort that will ultimately destroy our republic unless we engage. On this week's podcast, we're going to focus on Attorney General Merrick Garland's declaration of war with the recent memo issued to weaponize the FBI, including the Criminal Division of U.S. attorneys in 14,000 school districts across the U.S., addressing threats against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff, stating that in the next 30 days, the department will announce a series of measures designed to address the rise of supposed criminal conduct directed towards school personnel. Who, you ask, is making these threats, and what are the threats that warrant the attention of the U.S. Attorney General? Parents and grandparents, moms and dads. It's not Antifa who murdered people in the streets, destroyed public and private property. No, it's law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. We are the target of our Attorney General. This is completely outrageous. Here to discuss this threat, I want to welcome back to our podcast, Karen Bracken. Karen is a mother, a grandmother, an activist. She's been on the front lines of this battle for many, many years. Karen, welcome back to Proclaiming Justice.
Thank you, Laurie, for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to help us unpack this threat to our freedoms and government overreach in our children's education. Karen, tell us a little bit of your background and why you got involved in education issues.
Oh, well, it started probably with the Obama administration in 2008, and then with the race to the top and the implementation of national standards and just, looking at what was happening to education. I knew that this was the formalization of the indoctrination of our children, where we were going to start replacing academics with indoctrination
Mm-hmm.
and changing the attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs of our children. Um, Prior to getting involved in education, I did a lot of lecturing on UN Agenda 21,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what a pivotal role education played in advancing the policies of Agenda 21. So when I saw Race to the Top and the new standards and all that stuff, I knew what was happening, only because of my research that I did with UN Agenda 21.
Right. Well, we're grateful for all the work that you have done on this and other education issues. But let's unpack this issue, because this is blowing up on the talk shows this weekend. And there's not been any public comment from the Attorney General's office with regards to all the heat he's taking right now for some of the statements that he made. But with the battle we are facing in our classrooms across this nation for the minds of our children, especially with the onslaught of disinformation like the critical race theory and 1619 Project, as well as anti-Semitic and anti-American and anti-Judeo-Christian Black Lives Matter curriculum, we must re-educate Americans, and especially American children, about the truth regarding our history. We are witnessing a dangerous trend. You've been involved in this movement for a long time. How do you see the events that are unfolding today?
Well, I saw it a long time ago. So that's why I was so adamantly and so, you know, going after when they were trying to pass ESSA. I knew if ESSA got passed, we were done.
So tell us explain to the audience what ESSA is.
The Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed. Our illustrious Lamar Alexander was the sponsor of ESSA. And ESSA was just a recertification of the 1965 ESEA.
Hmm.
That really ESEA came about supposedly to provide funding to help poor children learn how to read. It started out, it was like a 15 or 30 page, it was a very small bill. Now we're into thousands of pages under ESSA. And like I said, ESSA was a mental health bill. It was not an education bill.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we fought that we fought that so hard to stop that from getting passed. Of course, it did get passed, and the Republicans helped it get passed. Um, and I knew that was the final nail in the coffin in our schoolrooms and the indoctrination of our
Hmm.
children.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. It's frightening to see, and here we thought, I sit here and I watch these talk shows and I watch these Republicans and they're, debating and they're being interviewed on Fox and some of these other conservative networks, and they're outraged by what they're watching happen. And I'm thinking to myself, you're outraged now? Where were you on January 6th? That's what I want to know, because I'm still outraged about that. But
Always outraged when they can't do anything about anything, and then when they can do something about something, they do nothing. So,
right, right.
you know,
Well, we're excited about what Governor DeSantis is doing, and he really is leading the way. He's a statesman. He is concerned about education. He was adamant in getting rid of Common Core and getting rid of the propaganda in textbooks, and he has completely revised civic standards. Of course, we were involved in helping to draft those standards in Florida at PJTN, and we were delighted that he was willing to support and adopt our recommendations to reverse the course of history in our classrooms, because our children are not being taught an accurate perspective of America, and let alone getting a civics education. But in Florida now, you cannot graduate from high school. You have to take from K through 12 civics classes, which is fantastic. And of course, we have been talking with other gubernatorial candidates. We've spoken with other state legislators across the country who now are wanting to follow Governor DeSantis's lead and adopt some education reform similar to what he's done also.
Didn't he just also end the high stakes testing?
Yes. Oh, yes. He's doing things that many of us who've been fighting these battles for years have been asking to do. So
that's the difference between him and, like, with the vaccines and all that. He brings in other people's perspectives. He doesn't just listen to the big talking heads in DC. He brings in other doctors. He brings in everyday people. He gets the opinions of multiple groups, and he takes that information, digests it, uses his common sense to make good decisions. He's not taking an order from, again, the talking heads in DC. And that's what we need more of.
Yeah, it's very refreshing. He's amazing. And he's very well respected by many Floridians. They're extremely excited about being under his leadership. So Karen, let's talk about the timeline with regards to the memo by AG Garland, because a couple of weeks ago, Randy Weingarten, who is the president of American Federation of Teachers, put out a statement condemning Governor DeSantis for fear that his policies were going to influence a mass exodus of students from the public schools. And what could be more fitting than parents removing their children from the public school indoctrination camps to private or homeschool education? What are your comments?
Well, we have to understand that without the public schools, she doesn't exist, and neither does her organization. They don't care about the children. They don't care about the NEA. The NEA, which is the National Education Association, it carries the water for the United Nations. They don't care about the children. They don't care about the student, the teachers. They don't care about education. They care about union dues. That's
right.
it. So if you start eliminating public schools and why do you think they're so against charter schools? Because they're not right. Yeah. So it all boils down to the same old money, money, money.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Then after, of course, she came out making that statement condemning DeSantis, then we saw the National School Board Association petition the Biden administration to designate parents and citizens as domestic terrorists for executing their constitutional rights to attend school board meetings and voice their opposition to the direction these school boards are taking their schools and their children's future. Is this America?
Well, I say it almost every day. I feel like I went to bed in America and woke up in China. So, no, it's not America, not at all. And understand that it all boils down to their agenda is not what it should be. Their agenda is not about education, students, or teachers. It isn't. It's about globalist, Great Reset, all the stuff you want to talk about, money, but it has nothing to do with what's good. And what they're doing is they're trying to instill fear, because they figure, parents now will be like January 6th. Oh, people that just went to DC are getting arrested. If I go to a school board meeting, I may get arrested for not even talking, just for being there.
Right.
So, and instilling fear to keep people away from the school board meetings.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, Karen brings up a very important point. They are using Gestapo Marxist tactics to try to silence we the people. And I just want to remind you all, there are more of us than are of them. And we cannot be silent. We have to speak up. I am telling parents and citizens after this last ordeal with the Attorney General threatening the citizens and the parents for attending school board meetings and having the audacity to even speak up, their constitutional right that parents and citizens must show up en masse at school board meetings. You shouldn't just, avoid going for fear, because that's exactly what they're wanting to do. In fact, every school board meeting between now and who knows when, because we're not going to be able to retreat from this battle in our school boards. We have got to stay engaged, but we should show up en masse. We should have standing room only. We should sign up to speak, and we should put them on notice. If there's something going on in that district, we need to put those elected officials on notice. Election day is coming. If we can't recall you, we are going to vote you out of office. That's the bottom line. We do not have the luxury of not getting engaged in the battle. You cannot retreat from this battlefield, from this front line, because if you retreat, what legacy will you leave for your children? Karen, just last week, we saw former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. He said, quote, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach." Who does he think he is? He has no right to tell we the people in our neighborhood, in our community schools, what they should be, that we have no right, we have no voice in the conversation about education. We absolutely do have a voice. We elect them to represent us. It is not the other way around. They do not dictate back to us. I mean, this is outrageous.
And that's the problem. Many parents and citizens gave up their voice long ago. They did not attend meetings. They did not get involved. And the school boards were basically taking on a power that they never had, but there was no one to stop them. So
Right.
now they believe they are the power over the parents. And it's parents, again, I have to say that, people, I was a county commissioner for 4 years. And when I used to attend meetings before I became a county commissioner and I would go to the school board meetings, there was nobody there. There
Yeah.
was nobody there. And it was like, so again, what happens is all kinds of things take place that you don't even know about. You basically handed your power over to them, and the school boards handed their power over to the state.
Yes.
So the state tells the school board what to do, and they do it, and they do not care what the parents think. And again, I believe that parents were asleep at the wheel, but it's never too late to take that wheel back.
Yep.
And now is the time. But I also have to say, yes, go to the school board meetings in huge numbers. That's intimidating enough. But when you speak, speak the facts, speak your mind, do it respectfully, do not call names, because this is what they want. Because the moment you start doing this, that's when they're going to start arresting you. Go there, speak your mind, say what you have to say, do it politely. Don't yell and scream and call people communists and names, and because that's exactly what they want.
Right. They're basically baiting us to get to that point. They're being provocative. They are making people angry, and that's why you see some of these, parents and citizens. I mean, they are outraged, not in a disrespectful way. They are outraged in a way that communicates, you are not going to do this to my child. That is my child. That's my property. They don't belong to you. But now we are facing, we the people are being threatened by a tyrannical government that is threatening parents and citizens with criminal actions if we even show up to hold elected officials accountable for indoctrinating our children. This is unacceptable, ladies and gentlemen. Now we become the target of our own Justice Department instead of holding our local elected officials accountable. It's unconstitutional. We are watching pornography be introduced to our children. We've just got a situation here in Tennessee where a student brought home a book that was riddled with pornographic content. It was disgusting. It's anti-Semitic. It portrays a 17-year-old boy as a sexual deviant pervert. I won't even say on the air what he was going to do to the girls that were lined up. And I'm shocked. I'm shocked at the response when I contacted the Assistant Director of Education for the county, for Cumberland County, and her response to me. I was shocked at how angry she was that I was calling to question what they were doing with their library. And she legitimized the decision by the librarian to bring this textbook, to approve this textbook for her library, for their children in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. She approved it, and she was insulted that I was calling and questioning her on it because they have great respect for their librarians. They are educated individuals. They've got accolades behind their name. You know what? All I have to do is look at the product. Look at what this so-called librarian with accolades brought into the schools. Sorry, all of her credentials just went down the tubes for me. So we are dealing with a leftist, Marxist, communist takeover of our republic by trying to take control of our children's minds. And they're filling them with this disinformation. They're teaching revisionist history in order to completely erase our past. And of course, we are reminded in the Bible, do not remove the ancient boundary stones. And there's a reason for that. Those boundary stones remind us of our past and help us to return by way of those boundary markers. And we, Karen, have forgotten our history. We have lost our way. We need to get back to the path of righteousness and demand that be reflected in our children's education.
Well, it's like you said, our children are not being taught history, so they don't know history. They grow up not knowing history. They're not taught the Constitution, which teaches them their God-given rights. When a person doesn't know their rights, their rights are easily taken away. And that's what we're seeing right now. I have 4 grandchildren. I have 3 great-grandchildren. I have 4 grandchildren. Not a single one of those children learned anything about the Constitution in school. And I mean, I've sat with them, I've talked with them. When they graduated high school, I gave them a check inside a pocket Constitution. And I said, you read this Constitution, we'll talk about it. And when you go to college, your professor trumps on your constitutional rights because you have an opinion that differs from him and he's going to lower your grade. You know, you hear about that. You just remind him of your little pocket Constitution and your rights, God-given rights of the First Amendment and free speech. So again, this is all done by design. They don't want our children to know history. They don't want our children to know the Constitution. They don't want our children to know their rights.
Right.
Because their plan is to take these rights away. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it so loud and clear right now. I also highly recommend parents get a group of parents together, find out what your school board districts are, find parents in each one of those districts, run together as a group to replace your current school board.
Absolutely.
I really do. I really do. You know, I became a county commissioner for that very reason. Lori, you know, myself, I used to say all the time, if you want to change the system, you must become the system. And I say that to people all the time. And then I say, well, gee, you know, maybe I ought to be following my own advice. So I did. I ran for county commissioner, and I did my time, but I think more parents need to get up and start running for school board, and they need to, like I said, every area has, school board districts. So you got to find good people in each district, get together, run as a group. Don't run as individuals, run as a
Right.
group. We are the group that's going to replace the people that are indoctrinating your children.
That's right. That's right. That's a good point. Let me ask you this, Karen. You ran for county commissioner. You won your seat. And did you have any political experience background before you decided to run, or were you just your average American citizen who was going to fulfill her role and her duty as a citizen of the United States?
No, believe me, the last thing I ever thought I would ever do in my entire life is run for public office. I never thought I would ever do it, but I felt I had to.
Yes.
It was probably the worst 4 years of my life, but it was a very eye-opening experience. If you want to know why your state and federal government is so corrupt, run for local office and
Yeah,
you'll find out real quick
it's true.
where the
It's
corruption
true.
starts. Yes. And that's why I say take a bunch of people and run as a group and replace them all, because my
Right.
problem was I was the only person that ran against 9 commissioners in the entire county. So I only won one seat. So it was me against all the other county commissioners that were embedded for the past 18 or 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very hard thing to bring about any change. That's why I say get a bunch of people together and run and let the communities know, how many people vote for school board and they have not a clue who they're voting for. Most people
Exactly.
don't even
It's
know who
true.
their school member is. They just pick a number, pick a name. Oh, that name
Mhm.
sounds nice. Oh, that guy's related to so and so. I'll pick him. But they know absolutely nothing about these people that they're voting for.
Yeah, or their policies. No, you make a very good point. In fact, when I travel across this country and speak to communities, parents and citizens in communities, I'll always ask, how many of you, raise your hand. I want to see a show of numbers. How many of you know who your school board member is? Maybe 1% or less than 1% will actually respond. And it's very sad because the most important races that we can flip the fastest, the easiest, with the least amount of votes are these local races, because most people don't even vote in those local races. They'll go down so far and then they'll just leave the rest blank, or they'll just pick anybody randomly, not really knowing, like what you said, not knowing who they're actually giving their vote to. So
I won
it's
the election by 36 votes.
wow.
36 votes.
Wow, wow, wow. That's again, it's that close, but look, you won. And this is what I'm trying to tell people. But running it as a group, that's wisdom, because that way you have a resource of others that can encourage one another, pray for each other. But it is what it is. If that isn't enough, all that we've talked about, I want to just hit again on the news that broke last week with A.G. Garland's daughter, because now we find out that the Attorney General has a conflict of interest. And here he is threatening these parents and citizens across the country. His daughter happens to be married to the co-founder of Panorama Education, which you mentioned earlier, who provides the resources for social emotional learning and critical race theory. So, of course, here comes Merrick Garland. He's going to silence all these people so his son and his daughter-in-law's husband's business doesn't get a lot of negative flack. And this is where we need to turn up the heat. Who does he think he is? By silencing us. This is an obvious conflict of interest for the AG, and it appears that he's trying to intimidate parents and grandparents into silence to take the focus off of the conflict of interest in order to further the agenda.
And you know, Panorama Education has been in Tennessee for several years.
No, this is the first time I'm even hearing about Panorama.
I have information back from 2017 on Panorama. And yeah, I know the Metro Nashville school. Panorama is a data mining company. That's exactly what they are. They'll tell you they're all about mental health. You know what? Who gives these people the right to determine if my child is mentally healthy, to determine how my child should think and behave and believe? That's not the purpose of school. I understand we have
Yeah.
children that come from, disadvantaged families, broken families. You know what? That's life in America. We've had that all along. Our schools should be teaching children to read, to write, and if you do all of that stuff and you teach children to love education and be educated, they can pull themselves up from
That's right.
whatever position they're in. But all of this mumbo jumbo, SEL, mental health, it's a bunch of crap. It's nothing but data mining our children. They are actually charging us to data mine our children. They
Mhm.
steal this information and then they sell it back to us.
That's correct.
So
Absolutely.
Panorama has a really interesting funding background. The Zuckerberg's wife, $4 million they donated, and Mark Zuckerberg is a mentor to the people at Panorama. General Atlantic, which is a global growth equity firm,
Mhm.
$60 million. You have Teo Capital just this year. All of these companies, it's all venture capital hedge fund companies, and what they're doing is they're investing in the data. They want the data. That's why they're giving all this money to places like Panorama. And then they word these surveys. I have the Metro Nashville's climate survey for 2021 from Panorama. And if you look at the questions in here, you can see, I feel like I belong. Well, if you answer that, I strongly disagree, well, then they're going to want to know, well, gee, why do you not feel like you belong? You can see
Mhm.
all of these very benign questions. I am happy to be at this school. I feel like I am part of this school. I feel like I belong. I feel socially
Mhm.
accepted.
Mhm.
All here is my school is a welcoming place for LGBTQ students. I feel safe outside. So all of these questions, although they sound benign and innocent, when they compile all this information, the assumption will be that these children don't feel safe because blah, blah, blah,
Or
because
are the children going to comply? Because isn't that really the ultimate goal, is to have a generation that complies with the government when the government says jump, how high? It's amazing how we have been convinced through all this social emotional learning, all these techniques, to think that we have to be happy all the time. We do our children a huge injustice when we don't prepare them for the difficult seasons in life, because it is the difficult seasons, it's the challenges in our lives, and we can all think about this, but it's the challenges that make us stronger, that make us better, that turn us back to our faith, which ultimately makes us a better country. Looking for, children to be happy all the time, or even adults to be happy all the time, it's a Pollyanna pie in the sky dream. It's never going to happen. And to try to convince our children that you have to be 100% happy all the time and you're not going to have challenges in your life, that does a huge disservice to our kids.
what our schools should be teaching these children is, everyone has uh, things to deal with in their life. Some children have more to deal with than others, but it's through education, it's through hard work that you can
Right.
pull yourself out of this stuff if you want. You should be encouraging children to better themselves. And just to get back to the funding, which I think is very interesting, not only Zuckerberg and a whole bunch of others, but you have tons of federal money coming into Title I, Title II, Title IV, the CARES Act, the Essa Act,
Mm-hmm.
with elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, all kinds of federal money. CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL
Mm-hmm.
funds. Now, this is interesting. Education First and the Novo Foundation. The Novo Foundation has given Tennessee, especially Metro Nashville, tons of money. They give grants for CASEL through Novo Foundation. Education First is a group that worked with a lot of the states. They were funded by Bill Gates,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually worked with a lot of the states to create their Race to the Top applications. And it's very funny that most of the states that used Education First were actually granted money. But Education First, I knew of Education First, again, through UN Agenda 21 research.
Mm-hmm.
So I contacted this group way back when, and I asked them if they were associated with the Global Education First. And they said, well, we're not affiliated with them, but we do support their policies. One of their policies, goal number 4 of Global Education First, is creating global citizens.
Yeah.
So, right. So Novo Foundation, again, gives money to them. And Novo, the Buffett, Peter and is it Jessica, Peter and Jennifer Buffett sit on their board. The only funders of the Novo Foundation are the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation.
Mm.
Yeah, and they are
Why are we
also
not? Yeah. Why are we not surprised? They've got to be in there somewhere.
involved in Tennessee. FERPA, of course, they changed the FERPA laws under Obama, which basically gives these third-party companies carte blanche access to our children's personally identifiable information. So this is no just innocent little, I care about your children's mental health group.
Right. Right. And what we see reflected in the curriculum, in the programs, in the even the library books are all moving our children in this direction, ladies and gentlemen. So, Karen, we are coming up to the end of our program. What would you like to say? Is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience to encourage them, inspire them not to give in, to stand your ground, draw a line in the sand in your community, and get engaged in what is happening? What would you like to say?
I definitely believe that you need to get engaged in your local community, but I also feel that we are in a war right now. And I believe that we need to get our children off the battlefield first. Fight the war, but get our children off the battlefield. You know, in the past year, how many parents had their children at home and were educating them at home? Of course, they were
Right.
using school programs, which I don't believe you should do. But I really do believe that we need to get our children out of these schools while we're fighting this battle,
Mm-hmm.
because every day that these children are indoctrinated, children are very malleable. It doesn't take much. There's a 30-minute video called The Children's Story. And there's a book, a very short book called The Children's Story. And this movie shows you how it was written by the guy that wrote Shogun. And shows you how in 30 minutes you can take a whole classroom of children and convert them from family-oriented, patriotic, God-loving children into children who hate their parents, hate their country, and hate God. Don't
Wow.
believe it. Is a very, very poignant 30-minute video. It's very old. Um, but I'm just saying, I think that you need to fight the battle, but I firmly believe you need to get your children out of this system because they are so malleable. It doesn't take much
Mm-hmm.
to turn your children around. It could be one teacher, it could be one class, and they will turn your children around. And one day you're going to wake up and you're not even going to know these children that you gave life to. It is your job as a Christian, it is your job as a parent to educate children. And so I firmly believe we need to get our kids out of the public school system, and to understand that like you said, there's more of us than there is them.
Yep.
Organize a school and pull your children out. You go to the school board meetings, you ask them to do what you want. They don't do what you want. Organize those parents, pull your children out of that school. I guarantee you in 1 week, they'll be coming back to you and saying, okay, what do you want? Because when they don't have kids in the seats, butts in the seats, they don't get money. I feel the same way for everything. Your employer threatens you, no jab, no job. Yep. Everybody needs to organize, because this is not an issue of anti-vax or pro-vax. This is an issue of freedom.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
If people would just stand up, you want jab, no job, guess what? Everybody walks out. Close the door behind you. You're either going to change your policy or you're going to go out of business. That's all it's going to take to turn this around.
Yep.
It's not going to happen. Right. Legislators, it's not going to happen through the federal government. It's not going to happen through the state government. It's got to come from us, and we can make it happen. It's just people have to realize they really do have the power to change things.
Absolutely. That's a government by we the people. Karen, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. This was so enlightening, as it always is. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the facts. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to warn our family, our friends, and neighbors about this existential threat. I believe we are facing the greatest national security threat in our history, because our children, our greatest asset, is being indoctrinated with this propaganda. God will hold us accountable. He will judge us for standing by as the world, even Christian leaders, accept the indoctrination of our children in our local classrooms against these historic truths. We cannot remain silent. We all remember the prophet Ezekiel, when God warned the prophet about the responsibility of the watchman. The watchman stands guard. The watchman looks to see when the enemy is advancing. Excuse me. And as a watchman, you sound the alarm. If the watchman doesn't warn the inhabitants or sound the alarm to the people living in that community, in that city, then if any innocent blood is shed, it will be required of you. But if you sound the alarm, if you blow the trumpet, if you warn your friends, your neighbors, your family, and they refuse to heed the warning, then if their blood is shed, it won't be required of you, because you did your job. You can't change everybody, but you can start telling people. Dietrich Bonhoeffer reminded us that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless, because not to speak is to speak. It says everything, and not to act is to act. In closing, don't forget to join us for next week's podcast as we continue this conversation about taking back local control of our community and our children's education. I want to also remind you that if you have not signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, you can help support this effort for just $20 a month. PJTN is on the front lines and in the headlines, but we can't do it without your faithful financial support and your prayers. I hope that you will prayerfully consider supporting our mission as we educate to activate Jews, Christians, and all people of conscience to stand on the front lines of this all-encompassing war. I want to leave you with a word of encouragement in the Psalms 144, verse 1. Quote, "Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle." God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren, the State of Israel, and these United States. Thank you again for joining me on this edition of Proclaiming Justice. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. For more information about how you can get involved, please visit our website at pjtn.org. As a PJTN Watchman, you can help us keep up the fight to preserve our freedom for our children and their children for such a time as this.